Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bruce Williams channel. In today's video, I want to talk about one of the most beautiful, lovely luxury watch brands in the world. That is Grand Seiko out of Japan. Now I know some of you watching this, you love Grand Seiko. You understand Grand Seiko, you own Grand Seiko, you get the appeal and the allure and the perfection presented in many of their products. I'm preaching to the choir here. And then there are others of you watching this right now that go, you know what? I just don't see it. If I'm going to spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, I don't want to buy a Seiko. That looks like a fancy Seiko. It looks like an overpriced Seiko. I'm going to take that budget and go buy a Swiss luxury watch or a German luxury watch from a brand that carries more name cachet, name brand recognition, that might have better value retention. And really, at the end of the day, we're in this hobby because we love watches and we want to connect with the watch on our wrist. But if you write off Grand Seiko without really experiencing or giving the brand a fair shake, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. So in this video, I want to talk about the strengths as well as the frustrating weaknesses of Seiko and Grand Seiko. And I'm excited to share my opinion with you, my experience with being an owner of Grand Seiko in the past. I don't currently own any of them at the moment, but I have, again, quite a bit of experience in reviewing this product and other luxury watches over the years of being on YouTube. So let's start with what the brand does so very well, and that is dial work, detail work, crispness and clarity, lovely textures, lovely, unique color play. If you think about it, the dial is the area of the watch that has the most real estate that you interact with visually every time you go to check the time when you look at your wrist. And so for the Seiko Epson Corporation to invest so much time and effort to perfect that area of the watch, invest that resource, that's a wise thing. Not only is the dial work, the details lovely, but the cases exude just a prowess about them. There's a high level of detail work. Seiko takes stainless steel or titanium or precious metal in some Grand Seiko instances, and they can create a shape that's lovely, that carries a fluidity, a natural curvature, or in some instances, a harsh angular rectilinear form, and they do it with a high degree of tolerance, with great delineation between the brushwork and the high polishing. Suratsu polishing is not just a marketing gimmick. That is very, very refined polish work that looks brilliant and deep. And if you look at a Seiko or a Grand Seiko at almost any price that they offer, and then you compare that to a different brand, maybe from Switzerland or from Germany, you notice the difference. Seiko is generally a step above when it comes to the case work, the dial work, and the detail work. I also like the fact that they really have appealing original designs that work well on wrist. Now, not all the time. Sometimes you'll get a clunker, you'll get a stinker, you'll get an homage watch designed from Seiko that really just doesn't hit the base. But for the most part, you get lovely dress pieces or dive watches, tool watches that carry just great designs. Really an appeal. There's some models that carry a cult following, and it's for a reason. They're very talented in doing that. And I like the fact that we get movement options. Depending on your flavor, your interest, you can get basic quartz, you can get kinetic, you can get solar-powered quartz, you can get a traditional high beat, sophisticated mechanical movement, or you can opt for a spring drive, which really is unlike anything else on the market and has just an impressive nature to it. An electromagnetic brake system. It's fully automated. It's part quartz, but it's part mechanical. It's absolutely accurate and it's fluid. It's not cold and clinical like some people think it is. It's really quite interesting. There's a great level of options out there when it comes to movements, when it comes to sizes, styles, complications, materials, and colorways. I mean, Seiko and Grand Seiko, they really produce quite a few great things. Now, they're not perfect by any means, although I would like to mention the spirit of Takumi. And what that is, Grand Seiko mentions it on their website, but after you've mastered a craft, in this case, watch design and production, the spirit of Takumi means that you have to go beyond that mastery of the craft. You have to take the next step, and that lives in every single Grand Seiko watch that they produce. They have to be perfect. This is the way. The spirit of Takumi is the way, the method that the artisans pour their entire being in, their hearts, their souls, their selves, into every detail of the process. And so really it is the pursuit of perfection. The slogan for Grand Seiko is made by hand for those who value perfection. They strive for precision, they strive for durability, and they strive for legibility. And really, I mean, as a watch enthusiast, that's exactly what I want to see. I want perfection in my timepiece. I want to be impressed by the artisanship, and I want to be emotionally connected to that piece of jewelry that tells me the time, to an accurate degree. And so, in my opinion, Grand Seiko, they are like 95% perfect. They're so close to creating the ultimate timepiece with most of their models. It makes that 5% that's lacking really stand out to kind of a glaring degree. And you compare that to maybe a Swiss watch or a German watch that's, let's say, 75% perfect. It's a great piece, but it has some areas for improvement. Because it's not so close to perfection, those areas for improvement don't seem like as large of a deal, and oftentimes you can live with those negative aspects to a longer degree, whereas with the Grand Seiko, because it's so close to being perfect, those little tiny things become frustrating, and you end up flipping that watch that you were in love with, right, in your watch honeymoon just 2 months prior. Let me know if you can relate to that aspect. I think Grand Seiko almost shoots itself in the foot because they are so close to perfection. And let's talk about those areas that they need to improve in that spirit of Takumi, trying to go beyond mastering the craft and really pursue perfection. In my opinion, in my experience, their bracelets are just a little bit lacking in overall experience. Part of that is probably due to just a philosophy difference between the Japanese and the Swiss and the Germans when it comes to the various countries of origin for major watch brands in this hobby. Grand Seiko, their bracelets are comfortable, right? They have screw links, they're flexible, they're nicely finished, not to the same degree that the lovely cases are, or the depth of detail to the dial work, or the lovely design of the in-house movement, or the fluidity of the original practical design. No, the bracelets just seem to be a little bit disappointing, and it can be a deal breaker for some. I would say the strengths of Seiko correlate with Grand Seiko, and also the weaknesses of Seiko are often found in the higher end Grand Seiko tiers. And so bracelet, I would say, generally is an area for improvement that feels lacking, but also the tactile feel of the bezel action if you're opting for a diver from the Grand Seiko Sport collection. Some of their models feel too bulky or too tall, especially if they're a very dressy and refined piece. I know that was the big thing that made me want to sell my first Grand Seiko. I really tried to convince myself for a while that the height was not an issue, but you know what? My dress watch being taller than a sport watch ended up being a deal breaker. And so Grand Seiko needs to address a few little things: the tactile feel of the bezel actions on divers, the overall bracelet experience, the refined feeling of a thinner caliber, a thinner sport watch or dress watch on wrist. And it would really take that 95% level up to maybe 98, 99. And at that point, I mean, how can you argue? How can we nitpick as a watch enthusiast searching for a lovely, perfect piece? And so I think Grand Seiko's really strived to do that recently. The most recent watch that I've reviewed from this brand was the white Birch that my father purchased as his dress piece. And that watch was the ultimate Grand Seiko. It was the most perfect Grand Seiko that I've handled thus far. It was so impressive. They really stepped up their game when it came to the bracelet. It felt more like a Swiss bracelet. It was more solid. It had a nicer finish all the way around the links. It wasn't quite as adjustable as I would like to see from the brand, but it was still very close to perfection. And the movement was thinner, it was more sophisticated and refined. The case more nicer on wrist and more elegant and understated. Really, it was the best Grand Seiko that I've seen so far, and it was very close to perfect, if not perfect. I think some of you may argue that watch that could be as close to perfection as Grand Seiko has ever done in contemporary times. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm here making a video trying to explain a brand that really does not need explanation. Grand Seiko, in my opinion, is a brand that does not need enthusiasts to explain, what Suratsu polishing is, or what a spring drive movement is, or how they are essentially Acura to a Honda or a Lexus to a Toyota brand. No, we can't help ourselves as Seikopaths or as watch fans to attempt excuse me, my daughter's calling me for dinner. Let me wrap this video up. I'll be right there, Evie. We can't help ourselves in trying to explain the brand, but the brand does not need explanation, because when you see it and when you put it on wrist and you see the crispness and the refinement, the level of detail work, the light play, the movement, you look at it all, it really stands on its own. So I'm going to leave you with one question here. I would love to hear your opinion. A couple years ago, the Seiko Epsom Corporation rebranded Grand Seiko, and they took the Seiko dominant logo off of the dial and they moved up that kind of small and quaint Grand Seiko logo up into prominence above the hand stack. And in my opinion, it really strengthened the design. It felt more full, it felt more balanced, it felt more like a luxury item, and I liked the move. But I wonder, was it the right move? Should the Epsom Corporation, should they have removed Grand Seiko entirely, taken off Seiko entirely, and rebranded as maybe Creedor or another name? Should they do what Tudor and Rolex do? Or, Honda and Acura, or Toyota and Lexus? I wonder if that would have been a better move that they would have found more success with. Like, I think about Grand Seiko and it just sounds right. It sounds appealing to me. But then I also think about, hey, I'm going to go buy a Grand Toyota or a King Honda. And I go, you know what? That sounds rather ridiculous. I'd like to hear what you think. This has been my ramble on Seiko and Grand Seiko, my explanation on a brand that does not need explanation, that pursues perfection. Let me know your opinions. I look forward to reading the comments. Thank you for watching today, and have a good one. I'll see you next time.